Hello everyone, it's Ravina. I hope you're all doing extremely well. Today I'm back again with another astrology related video, and today's video is going to pertain to rising signs. So on my channel I've talked about moon signs, I've given general descriptions about a multitude of different sun signs, but I've never talked about rising signs. And so yeah, I feel like rising signs lately have been something that I've resonated with the most when I watch like prediction videos, even tarot videos when they tell you to look at your rising sign. I have really resonated with the rising sign. I believe, honestly, the rising sign holds the most validity and just the most prevalence in people's lives because it also affects houses. So yeah, I'll explain the rising signs in a little bit, and I'm also going to explain different characteristics. So how people perceive you for the most part. Later on in a different video, I want to make videos on how you look, so aesthetics, but this video is more going to be focused on your characteristics. And so yeah, with that being said, let's just get on with the video. And so yeah, if you want to calculate your rising sign, I'll put a link down in the description below. You can go to Cafe Astrology. You do have to know your birth time for your rising sign. So a lot of your other placements, you can find out your accurate signs, your moon sign, all of that jazz, even without your birth time for the most part. But your rising sign, you do need to know your birth time. So yeah, if you know your birth time, plug it into that calculator, and then there you go. You'll know your rising sign, and you can skip to the description down below to your rising sign. So like I said earlier, your rising sign is how other people perceive you. So a lot of times if somebody guesses your astrological sign and they say you're a Cancer, they might be actually looking at your Cancer rising. So even if it's not your sun sign, they might be looking at your rising sign. And overall, I think it holds a lot of validity in your life because how others perceive you does have an effect on your day-to-day. Unfortunately, that's kind of how the world works. But it also affects your houses. So the whole right side, your whole houses on the chart, that is affected by your rising sign. So if you have a Leo rising, you're going to have different zodiac signs in your houses. You're going to have different placements, and that affects a lot of different characteristics and a lot of different aspects of your life, your family life, your future. So yeah, I really believe that the rising sign is one of the most important signs in your astrological birth chart. So I'm going to start off with Aries Rising. If you're an Aries Rising, people are going to definitely think that you are very opinionated, strong-headed, and competitive. You come across as somebody who really knows what they're doing, really sure of themselves. Definitely the type of people that you don't want to really mess with. They can be very blunt. So a lot of times if you have, let's say, like a softer sun sign, a softer moon sign, you can actually be very sweet and be really kind-hearted and have the best intentions, but other people would assume, without knowing you, that you would be a very blunt person, and there can be times where you have a more blunt approach if you have an Aries rising, even though you want the best for people, even though your intentions are pure, you can come across as harsh to other people. With that being said, though, Aries risings come across as very opinionated, very strong-willed, very independent. People really admire Aries rising. They look like the types of people who could be in charge, a leader, somebody in charge of a company. And overall, I do feel like they get a lot of respect for being this rising sign. You just come across as very strong and just very sure of yourself. Another thing I noticed about Aries rising is that they come across as more extroverted, and a lot of times they do come across as more adventurous. So that's a very fun aspect of them. A lot of people feel like Aries rising people are someone they can have a lot of fun with. Okay, so moving on to Taurus risings. Taurus rising people come across as very down-to-earth. They have a very sensual beauty about them. They're people that I feel like a lot of people probably come to tell their problems to. They just seem very nurturing. I would say Taurus risings kind of come across as more feminine. Even the males come across as a little bit more feminine, and even though they look very strong and stubborn, I think the whole nurturing aspect is typically associated with feminine characteristics, and a lot of Taurus risings really come across as like someone you can vent to, and they generally care and they generally are listening to your problems. Like Aries risings, they can come across as stubborn. That's what Taurus people are known as, the stereotype. But they do come across as very practical. A lot of Taurus rising can come across as a little bit conservative to other people, whether or not they are. That's what they kind of come across as. They can also come across as really materialistic, enjoying the finer things in life, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I notice a lot of Taurus risings have a lot of style, and they really pay attention to other people's style, and they love luxury items. So they're more about quality over quantity. Taurus risings can come across as lazy and passive, but overall they're very charismatic with it, and they just seem like the type of people that are very comfortable in life. And I just think overall, I personally, as a Cancer rising, I've noticed I gravitate towards a lot of Taurus risings, and I feel like they just have a really warm vibe to them. Okay, so moving on to Gemini risings. So Gemini risings come across as very childlike, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean they come across as overly naive. But let's say you're 25, you may look 16. There's a little bit of innocent youth to Gemini risings. And yeah, Gemini risings are the type of people that really want to entertain others. They really want to make other people laugh. They aren't the type of people that like uncomfortable silences. They just always want conversations to keep going. And I do feel like that's a really entertaining aspect of them. You know, Gemini risings really prioritize making sure that you're not bored. I just think overall people really perceive Gemini risings as quirky, creative, just really eccentric. They are an air sign, so people are going to automatically assume they will love to talk about conspiracy theories and just have really intellectual conversations about the world. And overall, I do think Gemini risings come across as pretty intelligent and somebody you would want to have a conversation with in general. Another thing I noticed about Gemini risings is a lot of times they don't like to stay still. So in a classroom setting, especially for a lot of hours, the types of people that will probably walk out a few times, they can be a little bit mentally restless as they have a lot of thoughts in their head and they want to just go, go, go. All right, so moving on to Cancer risings. So Cancer risings are the sign that come across as very intuitive and very nurturing. So they have a lot of maternal energy to them. Whether you're a male or a female, a lot of people come to Cancer risings to vent about their problems. A lot of people also just perceive Cancer risings to be like the mom individuals. So in a friend group, they're the type of people that really seem like they care a lot about everyone, wanting to make sure everyone's getting things done, like the mom friend of the group. And this could be in family life as well, and in general, like people perceive them to want to be parents a lot of times, even if they don't want to have kids. Cancer risings seem overall just very maternal, very nurturing. They come across as extremely empathetic. A lot of people look at Cancer risings and feel like they can tell them about all their problems. They seem very genuine with their responses, and I notice a lot of Cancer risings really care about listening. So they may not talk a lot, but they really, really listen, and a lot of people, I think, appreciate that in individuals because sometimes when you vent, you want to vent to somebody that is really listening to you. Cancer risings can come across as very moody. Even if they're not in a bad mood, they always seem like they're a little bit sad. They can also come across as lazy. Again, this is what you come across as. It's not necessarily what you are. But Cancer rising can definitely seem like they're kind of lounging around a little bit. But overall, they are very creative. They have a lot of creative ideas, and that's what they seem to be as well. Cancer risings tend to be very sensitive to energy, and so they do come across as moody. And a lot of times their moods can fluctuate all of a sudden, and you'll see it in their face, like right away, especially in their eyes. All right, sorry I'm in a different position. My grandmother just called me. But yeah, so we ended off with Cancer rising. And yeah, overall, Cancer risings are just very calm, very comforting. That's what they come across as. And a lot of times they can even come across as kind of like slow speakers. Just really people that just come across as very gentle, I would say, is the main key point for Cancer risings. Alright, so Leo risings. Leo risings are a fire sign, so right off the bat they come across as ambitious, leader type of signs. They seem very generous, very life of the party, the type of people in discussion classrooms, Socratic seminars who are going to talk the most. I definitely feel like they just exude a little level of power to them. Female or male, they have a similar type of powerful energy. They can come across as very dramatic, I would definitely say. A lot of times they seem like they want a lot of attention on themselves. They are come across as very passionate, very romantic in relationships. But a lot of it can seem very centered on themselves. Of course, like I said, this is how people perceive you. It may not be true, but a lot of their actions seem like it correlates to their own intentions, what they can benefit themselves, even if that's not completely true. Leo risings are very enthusiastic. Their passions are things that they're going to really, really have a lot of energy about. A lot of Leo risings can come across as very creative and the types of people to actually go ahead and pursue the creative pursuits. So they come across as very like director types, actor types. And yeah, I definitely feel like out of all the signs, I would say Leo risings just really come across, like I said, as the types of people who really want to be leaders, want attention on themselves. Again, that may not even be true. You may be actually internally a little bit shy, but that's what Leo risings come across as. They can come across as very prideful, a little bit egocentric, but overall Leo risings do have a lot of warmth. A lot of people gravitate towards them, and a lot of people want to follow them. So I think there's a lot of power in that. Alright, so Virgo Rising. Right off the bat with Virgo Risings, I think a lot of people perceive them to be intellectual and people that can get things done. They definitely, in my opinion, come across as the most judgmental rising sign. Again, that may not be true, you may not even be judgmental, but people may be a little bit standoffish to associating with the Virgo Rising because they come across like they're judging other people. Overall, though, I noticed that there is still a warmth energy with a lot of earth rising signs. A lot of earth and I would say water rising signs just have a little bit of level of warmth to them. They come across as very giving, very mother nature type of individuals, so kind of maternal like a Cancer rising. And again, going back with like the intellectual, getting things done, they really do come across as perfectionists, wanting things to go a very certain way. A lot of Virgo risings seem very organized. And they can also come across as really sarcastic. That's something I noticed, is their humor can be a little bit dry to the point where people aren't sure if they're actually being mean. A lot of times though, they're just being sarcastic, that's just their humor. Another thing I noticed about Virgo risings is they can come across a little bit pessimistic, and they can even be like a Leo, somebody who's naturally optimistic, or a Sagittarius, sun, but their rising sign comes across as like they really think in negative aspects of things, even though that could just be their humor. Overall, though, people do look at Virgo risings and see them as someone who's loving, but in the sense of like a strict mother type. Alright, so moving on to Libra risings. Libra risings come across as a stereotypical, beautiful rising sign, very feminine. They come across as individuals that can, I don't know, they kind of have like an Aphrodite effect to them where they seem like they value beauty a lot in other objects and in themselves, which can come across as egocentric, but again, like I always say, your rising sign is just how other people perceive you. It may not be completely true. Libra rising types come across as really romantic and very creative. They can come across as a little bit airheaded. Again, like I always say, it may not be true, it may not just be how people perceive you, but their head does seem to be in the clouds a lot of the time. I think that comes with the fact that Libra risings look like they're very creative, like they're always thinking of creative ideas, whether it's writing or art. And yeah, Libra risings overall, though, do come across as very nice, but they can come across as very indecisive. So a little bit of a pushover, that's what people perceive, even though Libra risings may not be a pushover. It's just how they kind of talk. They seem like they're weighing a lot of options, trying to find a balance, and people may think that means that they're not sure of themselves. Typically, Libra risings come across as sociable. People feel like they can approach them. They're very charismatic, and they come across as very idealistic. So like they see the best in people and best in situations and really believe like they can push things to their potential. That's what they come across as, someone who really believes in everyone's potential. So Scorpio risings. This is a very intense rising sign. I personally find Scorpio risings to be very interesting and intriguing to look at, but they definitely are individuals where I can feel standoffish to approach them. They're very mysterious, very private. They have very, very interesting eyes that kind of come across as judgmental. Like I could see how people perceive Scorpio risings to be judgmental, but I found their eyes seem like they really understand other individuals. Like when you talk to them, it feels like they kind of know you really, really well, even if you barely know them. It's a water rising sign, so they come across as very imaginative, very creative, very sensitive a lot of times. Even though they are an intimidating water sign rising, they do come across like they have a lot of sensitivity, a lot of empathy. And overall, they are a very intriguing rising sign to most people, I feel like, even if it's very polarizing viewpoints of how people perceive them. There's a lot of healing energy with the Scorpio rising, as most rising signs that are water have. A lot of people do come to Scorpio risings for therapy, for help with their problems, and I notice a lot of Scorpio risings actually are really happy with that. They like to comply with that. They give a lot of their energy to other people, and they enjoy having other people vent to them rather than them venting to others. Alright, so Sagittarius Rising people. Normally I can guess Sagittarius Rising people pretty well. They're very optimistic, very happy to be alive. That's what they come across. You don't really know. But they come across people that are just always seeing the really positives of life, and it can be very fun to be around, especially if you are having a negative day. A Sagittarius Rising will always come across that they can find the positives to anything. They're very open-minded individuals. That's how they come across. And they come across as very intellectual. Someone who would probably like to read a lot. Sagittarius Rising seems like a person who would love to have intellectual conversations, would love to have conversations for a long, long time. I would say out of a lot of the rising signs, Sagittarius Risings come across as like free thinkers, independent, someone who doesn't really rely on other people. Even though a lot of people gravitate towards them and they seem like they have a lot of friends, they still come across as like their own energies, their own. They can preserve that, and they have like a really interesting independent style to them that other people perceive them to really value themselves. This is definitely a sign that can seem stubborn, and I've noticed a lot of Sagittarius risings, because they're so social, a lot of people perceive them not to be able to have close connections with other people. They just talk to everyone. But again, that may not necessarily even be true. That's just how other people perceive Sagittarius risings to be. Somebody who is really good at talking to a lot of people, but just has a really independent, free-spirited nature. Alright, so Capricorn Rising. Like all the Earth Rising signs, just like Virgo Rising, Capricorn Risings come across like they can get things done. They seem very down to earth, but they do have an intimidating energy about them. But I really do feel like Capricorn Risings overall also have a very nurturing thing like Virgo, like a very strict father. So Virgo is like the strict mother. Capricorn comes across as like the strict father. They seem very responsible, very realistic, very practical day-to-day individuals. And of course, they can be like a Pisces sun, so their head could be in the cloud and they can have all these ambitious dreams, but their Capricorn risings makes it seem like they can actually get that stuff done, and that they're very day-to-day, so they look at the details of life. They seem very hardworking, very ambitious. There's a lot of masculine energy to a Capricorn rising, and if you're a female with Capricorn rising, this is not a detrimental thing. A lot of people will respect you automatically. I wish people would respect feminine energy too, but a lot of times in this world, people really respect masculine energy, so a lot of leadership positions, Capricorn rising seem like very capable of doing. There's a lot of strength with the Capricorn rising. They seem overall just very mature, even though they're very intimidating. I just feel like when people get to know them, Capricorn risings just seem like the person you want to go to for practical advice. And they can be harsh with their approach, but like a strict father, a lot of times it comes from a good, genuine place. Okay, so Aquarius Rising. Aquarius Risings, like Sagittarius, come across as free thinkers, intellectual, really independent. They're definitely a very eccentric rising sign, very interesting to look at. Their styles tend to be a little bit unique. They overall, like how they speak, I've noticed Aquarius Risings kind of have different ways of speaking as well. It's not like the trend. They just seem very different, very witty, somebody that you can really laugh with. They come across as like having the best of both worlds. So somebody who can take things seriously but also are really jovial. A lot of Aquarius risings seem like they always want freedom. Like if they're in a classroom setting, even though they come across intellectual, they don't seem like they really want to be in a classroom setting. They just seem like their head is really outside. They come across like they have a lot of ideas for the future, for the world, and like they can see things through. I wouldn't say Aquarius risings come across as detail oriented. They definitely come across as big picture individuals, which can seem like they may have trouble getting things done. But people don't tend to question Aquarius rising's intellectual capabilities. It's more of the practicality. And another thing with Aquarius risings being very independent, people can perceive them to be very flighty, people that wouldn't be very stable in relationships. Again, this may not be true, but people will look at Aquarius risings and feel like they just want a lot of freedom, they don't want to be tied down. Alright, so last but not least, we have Pisces risings. Pisces rising individuals are very dreamy. They come across like they're always in their head, they're always dreaming. They come across as very imaginative, very creative. Like a lot of the water signs, they just really have a nurturing energy to them. I would say Pisces rising are pretty similar with Cancer risings in this regard. I wouldn't say it's super maternal like a Cancer rising, but Pisces risings have a nurturing energy of like a friend. And a lot of times I feel like this energy is something that a lot of people really need in life. It comes across as somebody that you can ask for advice for, and they will be really understanding and you're on the same wavelength. They come across as very creative. Just like all the water sign risings, they just seem like they would be really successful in creative pursuits. I think of Billie Eilish a lot with Pisces risings. I feel like she just has that look, especially with her face. In my opinion, she comes across, even with her style, she just comes across as kind of feminine and kind. If you really look at her face and how she acts, I don't know, in my opinion, personal opinion, even though her style can be considered more masculine, I feel like she still has a lot of feminine energy. They seem very soft, very psychic when you speak to them. If you want advice from Pisces risings, it seems like they know you even if they don't, just like a Scorpio rising. A lot of water rising signs just have this natural gift of coming across as very intuitive and very knowing. A lot of Pisces risings also seem very spiritual. Not necessarily religious, but I noticed they come across as more spiritual, so they practice more like Eastern philosophies. Pisces Rising's individuals can definitely seem flaky. They can even seem flaky with their own personalities, like that's changing, and they can come across as moody. Even if they're not upset, the way they look can come across as like they are upset. And especially when they are upset, you can definitely read that at their face. Pisces Rising individuals come across as very moody. Even if they're not upset, they can still come across as moody. But especially when they are upset, you will definitely be able to read that on their face. How they feel, everything about that is really expressed physically with the Pisces Rising. And so yeah, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I find rising signs to be very interesting. I just think it's fascinating to see how other people may perceive you as, and to see if it even matches up, because everyone's birth chart is so different. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be making new videos very soon, so be sure to tune in for that. And I'll see you guys very soon.